Young people are set to change politics, whether that be running for office or heading out to the polls in larger numbers than ever before. Generation Z will leave a huge mark on American politics for years to come. This is Clarified. The boundaries of Generation Z birth years span from around 1996 to the early 2010s, meaning they range in ages between 11 and 27 years old today. Who are they, and what have they been defined by?
They've grown up in a much more fragmented, less cohesive society in America.
That's Morley Winograd, a senior fellow at USC Annenberg and an expert in young people and politics. He says certain events define every generation. For Gen Z, COVID-19, climate change, and Donald Trump's presidency are just some of the tumultuous events that have shaped their lives so far. But that's not all.
One of the major events in their life was the Dobbs decision and the taking away of rights around reproductive freedom that the country experienced. You have global threats to democracy in both the Ukraine and in Israel as we speak.
These events have made a generation care deeply about freedom and democracy. This generation is different from others in other ways too. They are digital natives, most unlikely to remember a time before smartphones.
The majority of them get most of their news and information from TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram.
They are also incredibly diverse, with just under 50% of the population being non-white. Many of them are also less religious than older generations.
Gen Z is a much more activist generation. They vote at higher rates than millennials did when they were their age, and they're much more inclined to take direct action to solve problems than they are to engage in what some people would call click action, as in not doing anything but clicking on social media.
How are they poised to change elections going forward? Well, they care more than other generations about certain issues like climate change, mass shootings, and mental health.
Other ones that have to do with the cost of healthcare, the cost of higher education, student debt, and the related issues there, but the cost of education in general, and the cost of housing.
They're also the most Democratic-leaning generation in America. In the latest midterms, Gen Zers supported Dems over the GOP by 27 points.
Those under 30, 50% planning to vote for Biden, 11% voting for Trump. That's a huge, it's not a margin that's impossible to overcome.
And now, more Gen Zers are coming of voting age. In fact, since 2020, 16 million Gen Zers have become eligible to vote. Meanwhile, in the same time frame, 10 million Americans, usually on the older end, have died.
The 2024 electorate will be about 10 percentage points younger and more liberal than the 2020 electorate. Keep in mind, the 2020 electorate elected Joe Biden, but by narrow margins in some critical states, battleground states. That may well be the shape of the state-by-state electorate in the United States in 2024. But since populations in terms of age and gender tend to be relatively spread evenly across the country, it does suggest that their impact on politics will be to create a terrain that's more favorable to the Democratic Party and its candidates at all levels of the ballot.
This creates some challenges for the GOP.
And so even though the Republicans have a relatively appealing economic message for young voters, let's do something about inflation, let's do something about the cost of education and healthcare and so forth, they are unable to take advantage of it to a great degree because the social issues get in the way of young voters.
That being said, Gen Z is a demographic that cares more about the issues and the candidate than the party.
Young people really are not into partisan loyalty voting. They care about issues, they care about their values, they're looking for candidates whose positions clearly are in line with their values of inclusion and tolerance and collaboration and passion and the issues we've already talked about, but the values are very, very important.
As a new block of young voters enters the polling booths, politicians tend to be closer to the age of those voters' grandparents. The current average age of a member of US Congress is 58, and in the Senate, it's 65. That's significantly older than the average age of Americans, which sits at 38. Recently, though, Maxwell Frost, a Democrat from Florida, became the first ever Gen Z member of the House. Energized by the success of other young politicians, more Gen Zers are running.
Frost, who is also of Cuban heritage, is 25, the first Gen Z member of Congress. Like many voters his age, he sometimes feels ignored by older politicians.
But in some races, age doesn't even come up, right?
That's Mason Morgan, co-founder of Run Gen Z, an organization encouraging young conservatives to run for office.
A lot of these American voters are fed up with the state of the economy or any number of issues, and they just want to know that they're going to be voting for somebody who is principled, who is going to work on the issues that they ran on, and that is going to be a fighter for them in their city council or in their state legislature.
He says Gen Z politicians can be successful with fresh thinking and cooperation.
But they are willing to go into the legislature and work, whether that's across the aisle in some cases, but in other cases work with their colleagues on the conservative side of things to say, look, we've been talking about this same issue the same way for 30 years. What if we start talking about it in a different way? Maybe there's a solution over here that we can find.
Between running for office and making waves as the newest members of the electorate, there's no doubt the Gen Z will make a splash in the upcoming election and for years to come.
It's no longer enough for Gen Z and young millennials to exercise their voice. They have to demand their seat at the table because they bring a fresh perspective and new ideas to existing and continuing issues that the older generation seems incapable or unwilling to address.
But it's going to be a younger and younger electorate, bringing us a more inclusive, a more tolerant, a freer, and more freedom-loving in terms of democracy electorate than we currently see.